Okay, everybody, we are back to Africa, and no, we're not talking about Egypt, and no, we're talking about not talking about ancient Egypt. We're talking about sub-Saharan Africa, and then some kingdoms that are going to develop, and again, let's just get right into it. Really, around the first century BC in sub-Saharan Africa, we really start to see a lot of movement of those Bantus people that we said had really kind of started a lot of civilization in Africa up in the modern day Nigeria area. And a lot of it seemed to be with cattle. They started to have better breeding programs, and you get a lot of movement down into the area down here, the savannah, in which you're able to get a lot of more grassland for the cattle. Another big deal was the bringing of bananas from Asia, eventually coming over to the Africas. Of course, bananas very high nutrition type food, along with taro and yams and chickens. And so they were really able to expand their food options. And again, more food, more success, more people. And what we start to see is eventually the formation of states. Now, here's a map. You get lots of different states, and we're going to talk about a variety of them. And most of these states really start to grow up due to a lack of resources, even though they're getting greater food resources. Again, we've talked about sub-Saharan Africa. There's not a lot of stuff there. There's a decent amount of area that you can't work with because of the deserts. And so, because of the lack of resources, people start to form into cities so that or cities and empires, if you will, so that they could control those resources. Most of them were done by family bonds and clans that were coming together that would intermarry, and slowly but surely over time, they're going to grow. One of the earliest kingdoms was the Kingdom of Congo, right in Central Africa here. Very, very strong kings, and Congo kind of helped set the establishment of these are going to be kingdoms. We're not looking at democracies, we're not looking at republics, we're looking at kingdoms. And the Congo also starts to help the basic area with expanding trade, and that's going to be really, really crucial for these empires to grow up. And one of the earliest empires to really grow, along with the Congo, was ancient Ghana. Here's the bizarre part, if you will. I just talked about the Congo. I'm going to talk about Ghana, and I'm going to talk about Mali after that, and other area empires in this area that I'm circling with the mouse. And what's crazy is that none of them we actually have any writing from. We know a lot about them because of Muslim traders and other people like Ibn Battuta, who I'll talk about later, that travel here. They write a lot about them, but they don't have a written language. And to achieve everything that they did without a written language is remarkable. This would be a gigantic empire for Africa right in this area here. They will rule from 300 to 1250. One of the big things, it is in Ghana that they are one of your first sub-Saharan groups to actually convert to Islam, and that's going to help get trade going. But the big thing they had was gold and salt. Gold is really, really important, but salt is even more important because it preserves food. And when you have those two things, it's pretty incredible. We don't really know how they fell. It seems like there might have been a civil war, but briefly after their fall, there were a bunch of states that kind of popped up, one of them being Mali, who will actually control the whole area after that, but nonetheless, a really impressive empire. And as you can see here, they had some incredible trade routes from areas like Timbuktu, which we'll talk about later, but Kumbe Saleh, that is their main area. It was really interesting. Kumbe Saleh is actually two cities that were 6 miles apart, and then they filled the entire interior with basically suburbs. But you can see lots of cities, lots of trade, and all of these are Muslim, all of these are Muslim, and then you got the nomads in between carrying everything. So it was a perfect situation. We see some really high-end art. You see this is a gold lion, really impressive. This was actually a sword hilt. And then you've got these incredible masks up here, which kind of blended the native religion with Islam. And then here on the bottom right, you see a mosque. Now, the probably most powerful empire that grew up in this area in this time period would be Mali, which started in the 1230s. It was founded by the great Sundiata, the Lion King, who was able to overthrow part of the Ghanaian Empire and then eventually create this one. This empire was by far the wealthiest, and they were able to trade goods like salt and gold and slaves. At its height, one half of the gold that was actually in Europe originated from Mali. So that gives you an idea of how much wealth these guys had. They also had a tremendous amount of copper, and they were really brilliant as they made money taxing trade. So they had taxes plus gold plus salt plus slaves plus copper. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And these are the trade routes you see, very extensive, even more extensive than Ghana before them, because not only were they just going up here, they were expanding all the way out. Timbuktu was without a doubt the top city here. We find goods from really as far away as India here, so that gives you an idea. To say we see the textiles and gold and ivory and slaves and ceramics and copper. These guys were just incredible. This is the famous mud mosque of Timbuktu, and you really see here a blend of African and Muslim architecture. And probably the most famous story, to give you an idea of how wealthy these guys were, was the Hajj of Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa was the leader of Mali. Okay, and in the 1300s, he went on the Hajj, which you all should remember, the journey of pilgrimage to Mecca. That's him holding a gold nugget. And it was said that he traveled with 60,000 people in his retinue and actually built houses in cities along the way so that he could go back and forth. He had over 200 camels that were full of gold. And he actually had so much gold that he gave it away, that when he got to the city of Cairo, he destroyed the economy, because gold, of course, its value is based on its scarcity. Well, this guy shows up giving gold to everybody that he possibly can, and that the value of gold plummeted 25%, and he sent the entirety of Cairo into a depression for 12 years. Guys, this guy had so much money that we, from records that we were actually able to find about him, that we calculated his worth today, and that he would be worth $400 billion, which means the richest person that has ever lived on this earth was from Africa. Bet you never knew that before. Now, eventually, Mali would fall due to some wars of succession after Mansa Musa. Well, many years after Mansa Musa, you got, different royal families arguing back and forth. And then as the royal family was getting weaker, areas would split off, and eventually they were completely conquered by a third empire in this area, the Songhai, who we'll talk about in the next time period. But incredible, we see the rise of these great empires, and it's not just in Europe. And the last great empire of this time is Aksum. They existed from 100 to the year 900. They really rise up in the 300s, where they're able to push out the empire of Kush, who we talked about way back under the Egyptians. They really set up in modern-day Ethiopia, and as you can see, they control much of this area, which is down here. You have Ethiopia and modern-day Sudan and parts of Egypt, as well as Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and then even over here into a little bit of Oman, actually. What's really significant about these guys is they had the first language in sub-Saharan Africa, the language of Ge'ez. And what was even more interesting is that they actually, under King Ezana the Great, were converted to Christianity. This is really important because they'll be the only Christian empire in Africa pretty much ever, although there's a lot of African Christians now, but this was the first empire. And they would be very, very strong. And if you ever wanted to know what ancient Christianity was like in the first couple centuries, go to Ethiopia, the Ethiopia Coptic Church, and you'll really see what it's like. They also claim to have the Ark of the Covenant that we talked about long ago. The story, actually, well, we'll get there in a second. This is the language of Ge'ez, so it's actually a little bit similar to Arabic as well, but written language. This is really interesting. This church right here, according to Ethiopian legend, that the ancient Ethiopians were known as the Empire of Sheba. Now, we do think Sheba was a real place and that perhaps it was where modern day Aksum is. And it was said that the ancient queen of Sheba, which is actually referenced in the Bible, visited uh, Jerusalem during the time of the great king of Jerusalem, not David, but his son Saul. And as he visited him, not Saul, I'm sorry, Solomon, as she visited the great King Solomon, supposedly they had an affair, and then she went home, and it was kind of a love from afar thing. But according to Ethiopian tradition, the Queen of Sheba actually got pregnant, and her son Menelik eventually returned to Jerusalem, met with his father, and as a result, took the ark home with him. Now, we do know that after Solomon's time and he put the ark in the temple, we don't have any historical writings of the ark. Now, I'm not saying it's there, but this church, Church of St. Mary of Zion, no one's allowed in it, but they say that's where the ark is. Now, the ark was fabled to have incredible powers, and the interesting thing here is that the guardian of the ark is chosen periodically, and it's a priest in the area that is chosen. And very interestingly, shortly after these priests gain power, what we often see is that very quickly they get sick, they get cataracts, and many times they die, and many say it's because of the exposure to the power of the ark. I don't know if that's true, but it's kind of interesting. The other thing on the right is that these guys were great builders. This is a stele. This is a single piece of concrete. These are actually the largest concrete freestanding structures, some of them in the world. It's not concrete, I'm sorry, it's stone. Um, it's really, really impressive to see these. You have some concrete ones over here. This is stone, but this is one solid piece of stone. These are some of the largest freestanding stonework pieces in the world. We're not sure actually how they did it. They say they did it with the power of the ark. That's why I have it over here. And these were actually to mark tombs of great kings. So as builders, these guys are pretty impressive. What's even more impressive are the churches they built inside of the city of Lalibela. This is the famous church of St. George that they actually carved out of the rock, guys. They, used hammers and chisels and picks and stuff, and to create this absolutely beautiful church. This is a real church that people go to. Again, really, really incredible. Here's another church. This is the church of Bet Abba Libanos. So this is in that same actual complex. There's a series of about 12 churches here, all carved out of stone. So things that you probably never had seen before. This empire was responsible. And you can't build this stuff without a high level of wealth and success. And they got a lot of wealth and success from their trade. As you can see, they are in a perfect spot. They connect that Indian Ocean trade, and you're going to watch a video on that. But we know Aksumite goods actually traveled all the way out to India, down Africa, all the way up. They traded with the Romans, with the Persians, and they trade really anything, so much so that their coins were actually found outside of this area. And it seems like they were one of the foremost traded coins in the world, along with Roman, Chinese, and Persian coins. Their big groups that they traded were ivory and gold. But eventually it was really not to last. You had massive climate change. Some of that desertification got down here. You had bad harvests, which really hurt the population. And then this entire area, the north, gets cut off by the Muslims. Now, the Muslims don't conquer them, but they really lose touch with a lot of their allies. And then they get hit with invasions from other groups in this area that brings them down. And so in the end, we actually see just these empires that develop, and Africa is full of dynamic empires that the Europeans didn't want to admit that existed, but were really incredible. Okay, so get your comments and questions, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.